Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all joining from around the world. Welcome to the fourth episode of Bangladesh Miracle, celebrating 50 years of development progress of Bangladesh. Organized by Innovision Consulting in association with the Financial Express and the Department of Economics, Northsouth University as the key partners, along with Empower, Colors FM, Windmill Advertising, and the Young Economists Forum, NSU, and Pintography. Bangladesh Miracle is an integrated dialogue campaign that is being organized by Innovision to celebrate 50 years of development progress of Bangladesh. And over the next 1 year, we will be discussing and having quite a lot of policy discourse on important development topics of Bangladesh. We started last month, and today is our fourth episode. And today we're going to talk about a very interesting topic, which is startups in Bangladesh and building the startup ecosystem. We'll discuss, debate, and define the interventions that are essential to unleash the power of the startup ecosystems of Bangladesh. And today's webinar is exclusively organized with thematic support from Patao and Anchorless Bangladesh. I thank both of the organizations for their cordial support that they have extended to us. I'm Mohammad Ubayat Sarwar, Managing Director and Lead Consultant of Innovision, and I'll be moderating today's session. When I look at the startup ecosystem in Bangladesh, I see a very youthful, vibrant ecosystem. But I often ask this question, are we doing enough? And the reason I ask this question is because it's been quite some years, several years actually, we are seeing the startup system budding, how far we have come. If we compare with some of the ecosystems in Asia and the Pacific, where we are and how do we fare? For example, Mumbai is ranked #1 as the emerging global ecosystem. Jakarta is #2 in the emerging global ecosystem. And also 30% of the top global ecosystems are in the Asia and the Pacific region. So we are sitting right on the nest where the world's startups are coming up. Question is, are we producing those who are contributing to the world and also contributing to Bangladesh? And in that context, today's session is very unique because we are talking about Bangladesh. And Bangladesh, as you know, is a resilient nation and also a nation that has given a lot of new to the world. So without further ado, I'll take you through the session. And today we have with us Rahat Ahmed as the keynote speaker. Rahat is the founder of Anchorless Bangladesh, and also he is the senior advisor of NSU Startups Next. But also with Rahat, we have a stellar group of participants as panelists. We have Professor Dr. Abdul Hanan Choudhury, Dean School of Business and Economics, Northsouth University. We have with us Fahim Ahmed, President Patao. We have Laviva Mazhar, Investment Associate, Lush Capital. We have Saduddin Imran, Chairman and CEO, Innovision Consulting. We have Shamma Ragib, SaaS Transformation Leader, Colibra Incorporated. We have Bijon Islam, CEO of Lighthouse Partners. So today, I'll start with Rahat Ahmed for the keynote speech. And I know him very well for his very eloquent and sharp discussion and debate about the ecosystem of Bangladesh. I'm eagerly looking forward to you, Rahat. Over to you.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm going to start timing myself so I don't go over here. I guess, how do I get to the next slide? I'm just going to, can we go to the next slide, please? So one of the things that I really want to talk about in the 10 minutes is a bigger picture on Bangladesh startups and all the money that exists in the world. I think one of the biggest issues that we've encountered in Bangladesh, looking at the market over the last 2 years on a very active basis, is we are often looking at the short term, and we are not recognizing the amount of money that exists in the world that could potentially come into Bangladesh. We have a $330 billion economy, and at any given point, I think it should be noted that in the world, there's about $111 trillion of assets being allocated. In the year 2020, 300 billion went into startups and through venture capital, 300 billion. That's actually 0.27% of all the money that's actually being allocated. That's actually not that much money, right, in the scheme of things. Yet, when you compare that to the fact that Bangladeshi GDP is 330 billion, it strikes a chord. What happens when a penny of that, a percentage of that comes into Bangladesh? The real number last year was actually about $40 million, which is less than 0.1%. It's actually 0.01% of the 300 billion that was allocated. So the question then becomes, why is more money not coming into the country, right? And what we basically bring it down to is four things. We need to present opportunities to international investors, especially who have access to this capital, with rewards that match the perceived risk. Now, we as Bangladeshis can say, hey, you know, the country's doing amazing and all this great stuff. But for somebody who is investing from, say, New York or London or Tokyo or Singapore, they don't wake up in the morning and say, hey, I'm going to put money into Bangladesh. They wake up and say, I'm going to put money into what I think is the best investment considering the risk I'm going to take, right? For that to happen, we also must be cognizant and aware of what those metrics are. And for that, three things also need to happen accordingly. First, startups must operate at a higher standard. Uh, we're still on that slide. No, we're still on the previous slide. Please, I'll tell you when to switch it. Please go back to the previous slide. Startups still need to operate at a higher standard. And why is this important? Again, similarly, when somebody is looking at a Bangladeshi startup versus an Indonesian startup versus a Chinese startup, they're going to compare the three. So when somebody's going to jump into this country, they need to know that this is the best thing in Bangladesh, and that's why they need to put the money into the country. We also need local investors to structure deals appropriately that are friendly towards all the capital that's outside in the world. If a local investor takes 70% of a startup and the founder only has 30%, chances of them raising capital is very low because the founder is not incentivized to continue growing the company at the rate that the international investors want. And we also just need more funds locally. In Pakistan, over the first half of this year, there's been $120 million raised. Part of it is because there are now 5 to 7 local funds actively investing in startups. We have a few, but we need a lot more, and we need them to operate in a way where the deals are friendly towards international VCs. That's something I'm sure Lavika can touch upon later. Next slide. So why does it matter that we actually invest in startups and not traditional companies? Now, there's absolutely nothing wrong with traditional companies. You know, one thing that I always say is, you know, amazing companies like Transcom and Akich started off small and became, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue companies, right? This is not about good or bad. This is about the type of company and wealth creation that can happen. Now, we know there's a lot of money out there in the world. The question is, how do we bring it to Bangladesh? In a traditional scenario, what we're often used to building, let's say, you know, a traditional IT company or a manufacturer, even if the owner is Bangladeshi, the thing is the client, the clients that they depend on for continued generation of revenues are foreign, and they can choose to decide whatever they want to do. Now, what happens in that scenario is a company in that space that's generating $1 million in revenue will get valued at roughly, say, a 3x multiple to the revenues, and that'll be worth $3 million. And because they're at the mercy of clients that are abroad who have the option of choosing from 20 different manufacturers, they may not decide to actually invest or they may not decide to increase the amount of business done with that company, even if that company raises $1 million, right? The idea is this. On the flip side, we have the startup scenario where their companies are going to be more product oriented. You know, Shamma, I think later on could talk a little bit more about this. When a SaaS company has $1 million in revenue, they may be valued at $40 million in Bangladesh. The standard number right now is about 15x. Company like Wix.com, which does ready-to-go websites, trades publicly at they generate $1 billion in revenue a year, and they trade publicly at a 15 billion valuation, so that's a 15x. I think for a smaller company in Bangladesh where there's a lot of upside, it could go up to 40x. Now, why is that much more interesting? On a product basis, when a client can be onboarded overnight, that's really huge, right? That means when an international investor gives that company $2 million, $3 million, $4 million, that company can go out and acquire customers. And because that product operates on its own roughly with added features on every now and then, it can continue to grow and become potentially a multi-billion-dollar company. Two great examples we've seen in India are Freshworks and Zoho. Both are companies which originally started out in India and are now based out of San Francisco and are worth $3, $4, $5 billion each. Now, one of the things that's really exciting about that is in a traditional scenario, majority of the wealth that's created is actually being created for the person that you work for, right? So when a piece of garments is manufactured for a company like Zara, Zara is actually the primary valuation beneficiary, right? So their valuation is $100 billion in the stock market. But think about the companies that actually made their garments. They don't get that level of valuation. On the startup side, because the product is the king, what happens is the Bangladeshi owner is who's getting that valuation. So the wealth is actually being generated in Bangladesh by Bangladeshis. And this is a metric via which Bangladesh can actually go to the next level, not just the salaries or the cash that we get from a foreign company. Next slide. So, one of the things that stands out here that we've looked at, and we can share this more in detail later on, Bangladesh, with all its growth and everything, we've actually generated roughly, and this is data from last year, we'll have to update it for this year, we actually generate roughly $1 per person in startup funding. India, in comparison, is doing almost $30 a person. Now, considering that both countries have roughly the same GDP per capita, and Bangladesh is actually showing faster GDP growth, that disconnect should not exist. So for us to bridge that gap, we must have higher standards in this ecosystem to make sure that our founders are able to go into a venture capital fund's office in Singapore or New York or London, give their pitch, and walk out with a term sheet, right? They need to be good enough to actually execute at the highest level. And we need to make sure that we are there to support them. Now, I definitely think this is possible. And in the next slide, please, I'm going to show you some of the opportunities that exist. We divide up all investments into effectively two categories at Anchorless. One are the domestic investments, and two are the international investments. Now, people say, well, Bangladesh is too small of a market. That's not true. You've got 165 million people, 40 million people in the middle class. The thing is, it's growing. Ultimately, investments are about a time series, right? You're not investing in today for what the companies are today. You're investing in them for the potential. And we've identified 5 key categories that are quite important and we think are all multi-billion-dollar opportunities: healthcare, agriculture, education, garments, and logistics. And on top of that, fintech, financial technology products, actually are an overlay that could help add value to every one of them. On the other side, we have what we call tech labor arbitrage plays. That means we use local costs while generating global revenues. And in the SaaS, especially in the software as a service sector, this is incredibly important. I think Shama can probably touch upon this as well, where they built a product where majority of Alice's revenues can actually come from overseas next year or even this year. However, the brilliant software engineers and developers that exist in Bangladesh are now going to be not only get paid more, they will learn more, and they will be able to participate in an economy where their purchasing power will increase over time. Next slide. Got 30 seconds, and I think sometimes it comes back to this. We always say, oh yeah, we don't have the talent. Well, this is a list, and maybe this is not as easy to read, but on the left side of every one of these images, you'll see NVIDIA, you'll see Uber, you'll see Google, you'll see Apple, you'll see Waymo, who's doing these self-driving cars. Did you know one of the most senior developers at NVIDIA for their GPUs is a Bangladeshi? The question is, what are we doing to bring them back home? Now, it's easy to say, hey, listen, you're Bangladeshi, come back home because you're Bangladeshi, that's it. But they're gonna be giving up a lot if they do that. But the thing is, the financial opportunity is there. If you are able to actually say, listen, if you come back and we will fund you initially for a startup, and if the potential is to build a $100 million company, then they have the financial upside. You combine the two, and then you have an opportunity to build culture, you have an opportunity to build ecosystem, and reconnect all the wealth leakage that has occurred from Bangladesh to abroad over the last 20 years. So I'm really excited as an investor in Bangladesh to not only reconnect them, but also work with all the exciting founders in this country to build these startups. Because I know in the next 10 years, we should be bringing in billions of dollars, not just 40 million or 50 million. That's not enough, we're better than that. So I'm really excited about the next 10 years and happy birthday, Bangladesh.
Thank you so much, Rahat, for diligently being on time. And we share the same enthusiasm as you do, and we believe in that conviction. But this last point that you have on the slide, every graduate that leaves the country leads to wealth leakage. And I think, I mean, one of the core point of your whole presentation was that startups can lead to a lot of local value creation, a lot of wealth, and we have the factor condition for that. You have identified 5 key sectors. You have also identified the strengths that the Bangladesh ecosystem can offer. We will discuss further about it. But when I move on to my first panelist, Dr. Hanan, I will basically focus on this question, on this point that you have, that every graduate that leaves the country leads to wealth leakage. But also the question is, I mean, there are 2 sides of it. One is we create graduates and they leave, and then there is a vacuum, but we also have to create more graduates to feed into the sector. So, sir, are you there with me?
Thank you. Thank you very much. First of all, Rubaiyat Sarwar from Innovision Consulting for inviting me and also arranging such an important discussion today on unleashing the potential of the Bangladeshi startups ecosystem. I must thank also Rahat Ahmed for giving the keynotes, although in his keynotes, heavy emphasis have been given on the funding parts in terms of attracting fund and also scaling up the businesses. There are opportunities in Bangladesh, those things. I would rather go in different direction from the academic institutions point of view, because today here we are actually talking about the Bangladeshi startup ecosystem. Are we there at least in my view, whether we have been able to create an ecosystem for startups to grow over here in Bangladesh in all respect. The first very thing that, well, we all know that, well, it is very important for any nation, to create a thriving startup ecosystem. That is what is very important for all the nations. And because we know that, well, it is going to help the economy to grow. And of course, it is going to help enormous number of young, students and young minds to, to nurture their talent. And obviously, eventually it is going to give us opportunity even to create, employability and huge jobs in the context of our country. And it is very important actually. So, despite talking about this thing that, well, we really need a startup ecosystem, we have to also acknowledge that, well, creating an startup ecosystem is not that easy task for a country like even Bangladesh, because it is challenging, to motivate the young students, young minds, even the entrepreneurs and investors and business communities sometimes. And for a nation like even Bangladesh, it has become very difficult sometimes to create, an eco-friendly environment for, startups. Okay, so government and large corporations are also having trouble. But yes, surely after liberation, within this 50 years, especially last 10 years, Bangladesh has done enormous, growth, I would say, both economically and also progress in our other sort of development. And during this pandemic, we have also observed that, well, our young minds, young students have been able to devise many startups, many e-commerce platforms that has grown enormously. I think a few of them are also today's session. Rahat has been actually very passionate, helping even academic institutions, and I must acknowledge his contribution even towards university like North South, giving all sort of guidance and teaching, mentoring, training to our young kids to motivate them and also to be prepared to entering into the startup ecosystem. So if I would like to see the scenario of the whole country's, academic institutions, are we there, when we talk about in the context of global advancement of all startup progress and growth, even compared to India and neighboring countries like Indonesia and India and all those countries have done Bangladesh is yet way too far behind. The part of the reason I think all of you and most of you are going to acknowledge, even I being as an academician, I would also like to acknowledge that from the point of service delivery that we are providing from the academic institutions, we're way too far behind yet to transform and convert our students to be very focused on going for real startup ventures and taking that channel. That is what has become actually very, very challenging for all of us. North-South being being the pioneer institutions in the private sector has done a great job, I would say, that setting up the NSUS startups, and the contribution of Mr. Rahat Ahmed is enormous in that sense that he has given a direction to our university to even create an incubation center in the university so that our young students are going to be motivated and directed, and also those who truly have talents and potential, they are going to give through a process, training, mentoring, and support. That is what is actually that from the academic institutions point of view, we are doing at North-South University. So the question that you have actually focused on how management or executive courses at universities are helping Bangladeshi startups. I do not want to say that we are a failure. No, we have done great jobs so that you can see that, well, there are plenty of startups, businesses, successful ventures have already been started. Now the question is how many global class CEOs we have been able to produce. Maybe we have yet to go a long way there. Part of the reason in our academic system yet we could not incorporate many advanced things that are truly very pertinent at this moment in terms of technology, the analytics part, and the all sort of digital marketing and the frontier technologies. No matter you talk about artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning, anything you talk about, these are the things that we could not yet introduce or even embedded with our curriculum heavily. So we are behind in terms of even leadership training. We are behind in terms of even pushing our students to go for entrepreneurship rather than focusing on heavily on working under somebody else. We are yet behind. But I see clear positive sign. I would say that, well, if you look at some of the top business schools like North-South, even our competitors, those universities are doing great in terms of pushing or helping some of their graduates to be inclined with going for new ventures and new ideas to grow. And people like Rahat and other people have come from even from global, with global experience here in Bangladesh. These are the things that are truly very important, because we want to see that, well, knowledge transfer is something very important. So I would like to see that, well, in the global platform, those Bangladeshis, Rahat has mentioned quite a few, that they are doing great job in the global platform. These are the people they really need to help academic institutions in our country, so that in the academic arena, in the academic process, we can transform, we can process our young kids and young students and divert them to go for taking the challenging task. I do not want to say that, well, we do not have potential students. We do have, but in most cases, we are a big failure in the sense that we cannot simply motivate them to go and take their challenges. And I'm sure that, well, the time has come that most of the graduates now, they do understand that we are actually entering into a future which is going to be a jobless future, and therefore there is no other choice other than taking own initiative and to be able to employ self-employment is important, and also creating jobs for others. So the good part is, through our startups.
I have a question to you here, sir, specifically.
Create some startups, and Rahat knows that, well, how our startup organizations, they have been able to attract even fund from global, ventures, venture capitals and other places. I would like to see more, funnel of foreign investment over here. But then again, we have to also motivate and also see that, well, our local companies and local investors are going to be also interested in funding those creative and innovative minds of our country, so that we can see that this platform are going to change in the upcoming days. So it's clearly there is going to be a good hope for us and Bangladeshi students and young minds, young youths. They are going to make this country, I would say, that even far better in the upcoming years and upcoming months, because during this pandemic we have observed that, well, many of our business ideas and are going so very fast in the context of our country's business platform. We see that clearly good sign. So those positive.
Sir, can you hear me, sir?
Yes.
Sir, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear.
Sorry, sir, to interrupt. I have a quick question to you. Are there any courses or executive programs that North-South is offering to build the capacity of the C-suite professionals?
Not really. In our executive program, we do have an opportunity to invite people from industry and corporations, people like Rahat and other people. They can come actually from, working, but if you talk about our curriculum and our programs, yet way too behind because of our too traditional approach of giving degrees, not South. You have to understand that Bangladeshi academic system and curriculum is highly regulated by UGC, highly regulated, which is also I would say that to some extent heavily dominated by the government university thought process. And that's why, even knowing the fact that I know that, well, how important it is for us to teach even a data analytics course in our business classes, but I simply cannot introduce that. So sometimes people like us, we are within the limitation that we cannot simply offer courses knowing the fact that this is very important. So we are trying to do what we are doing in the graduate classes, particularly bringing people from corporations and industries and businesses. We try to give that sort of guidance and helping students to be directed to that direction. But as far as curriculum goes and syllabus goes, yet we do not have it. Not only at North-South, it is not anywhere in our country. Okay. That's the saddest part, Rubaiyat, if I would like to acknowledge, because the world is advancing heavily. The industry floor is changing, every day. But there is clear gap from the academic and industry part. In one side, we see the demand of the graduates are totally different. And another side, we could not actually produce that. Rahat knows it very well. When they are teaching our students, they often complain that these students do not have basic concept and basic ideas of very basic things about startups or entrepreneurships or all those, small things. Why? Because our education system is yet heavily a curriculum based, and graduates or students are heavily focused on, their CGPA and grades and certificates, rather than even understanding that, well, there are enormous problems in this society. For every single problem that we can design a business, and that business can be a successful business, that can be a sustainable business, and, they do not have that mindset actually. So those who are thinking beyond this boundary, these are the people, they are coming forward and making the changes. So you see, Ilyas has done great job in Pathao, or Ajoy has done great job in Nagod, and many platforms that I can actually give example from North-South point of view. These are our students, but they were actually beyond the box thinker. So they could do good, even they are not focusing about heavily on textbook-based education or classroom-based education. Rather, they were actually looking towards the surroundings and trying to resolve any issues or problems, and and designing a new business, and they took the opportunity actually. And that's what we see actually.
So thank you. I need to move to Fahim. You have come to the interjection point where exactly you spoke about Patao, being a successor or a successful example. But I think, the key point that you have said is clearly our education system is yet to catch up to produce, also to build capacities of the C-suite professionals as per the need of the startups. And I think, that's a big challenge, and we'll speak about it. I might come back to you, sir. So just allow me to move to Fahim and focus a little bit on his experience. And Fahim, are you there with me?
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
I can clearly. So Fahim, as Hanan sir was speaking about how being a success case, and we all know about it. But of course, that success did not come without its own pain points. So what have been your challenges in building this organization, this startup that we take pride of? What do you think are missing to unleash the potential of the Bangladeshi entrepreneurs?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And thank you, Rahat and Professor Chaudhary, for your contributions. As you know, Patao and our journey over the last 5 to 6 years really traces the journey of the startup and tech ecosystem in Bangladesh, and with it, all of the challenges and all of the opportunities that come with it. And so if I talk about the challenges that Patao has faced in the past or has risen to and continues to overcome are quite similar to the challenges that are faced by the broader industry. I would say there are 3 things. First of all is scale and scaling. Second one is competition and competitiveness. And the third one is capital raising and deployment, right? So first of all, the scale. Now, Patao started while Ilyas was still at North-South or just finishing up his MBA at North-South. And it came out of the imagination, and it came out of a pent-up demand of a problem that existed today. And the scale of that problem was so massive, the traffic and the need to disrupt the transportation infrastructure, that it had instant product market fit. So where many companies falter is in the problem identification. Some are not ambitious enough in identifying a problem that is large enough, that has a pent-up demand and requires a fix today, not a hypothetical one in the future. Whereas some others are, while challenging, are not ready for a solution to be delivered today. So it's critically important for us to assess the addressable market accurately and to come up with a go-to-market strategy. That is the first and foremost challenge for any startup, and for Patao, that has been the same. And where we have succeeded is where we have been able to retain that startup culture. So in terms of many of our verticals, so today we have over 8 million users, we have over 300,000 daily earners, and we have over 30,000 small businesses that are plugged into our network. And we have 12 services. We're in 2 countries, Bangladesh and Nepal. Where we operate at our best is when we take a startup mindset within our business. So for example, when we ran Nepal, it works as a startup within a startup. So that culture, that mindset is critically important towards scaling. It's also important to be able to attract talent and develop talent. Rahat had touched on the importance of ownership, and how the salary that you make today is not indicative of your career trajectory, but rather the ownership that you can acquire in the company. That is what creates wealth for you in the future and creates value in your own professional endeavors. And that's been the same for us at Patao. So we have an ownership culture where the key employees have a stake in the company, but that ownership culture goes far beyond just stocks and shares, right? Although that is an important start. It is also a mindset. It is a culture that allows you to own the work that you do and own and have a vested interest in the outcome. So that is the type of spirit that we try to inculcate in our teams, in our leadership, as well as in the young people that join our organization. So so that's the first thing that comes to mind when you speak of challenges. The second one is competition. Now, if you take the three verticals in which we operate, in each of these verticals, we compete very heavily against globally operating and highly funded, and in most cases, publicly listed competitors. So in ride sharing, we compete against a $100 billion globally operating publicly listed company. In food delivery, our main competition is a $20-25 billion listed company with operations in about 50, 60 countries. And in e-commerce logistics, the industry is dominated by an $800 billion company that has also built up its own infrastructure on the deliveries and logistics front in Bangladesh. So it becomes extremely important for us to develop competitiveness and develop moats against this very formidable market forces. And how do we think about doing it? So there are two things that we can do on our own, and a third thing that for which we need greater support from the ecosystem. So the first thing that we've been able to do is to be very agile and utilize our localization as an edge. So we have one of the largest and, though of course my view is biased, the strongest tech team in the country. We have over 80 engineers who are able to, quickly innovate, develop products for the local market and ship within, 2 weeks sprint. That helps us stay, a step ahead of the competition, where they have to justify any product development ideas to their global dev team, wherever they're sitting in Silicon Valley or in India or in the region. So that allows us to truly focus on service quality and user experience, because we cannot compete just on the basis of pricing alone, because the capital at some of these competition is quite substantial. The second one is to identify areas where there are barriers to entry, right? So in consumer-facing marketplace, because these concepts are largely transferable from one market to another, there are very few barriers to entry. You don't need a license to, you do need a license, but it's not very hard to get a license in order to start a ride-sharing company. Same with food delivery, right? If there is a barrier to entry, it is really capital. But in other types of businesses that are more B2B, that are more relationship driven, or where the problem set is very specific to the market, or certain sectors and certain types of products that are naturally more regulated, such as fintech, financial services, etc., that require a license. Those offer certain modes, those offer certain barriers to entry for local startups. And it's important for local businesses that are coming up to identify areas where they can constantly find ways to stay a step ahead of competition. Now, and that's where you have to balance the scale and the competition issue, right? Because, if you've picked a problem well, it's large enough, fantastic, congratulations, you're on your way to scaling. But if you've proven out the market, that also means that there are potentially more people entering into that market. So you have to think of balancing both. Another area where we do need more ecosystem support, and especially on the policy front, is creating an enabling policy environment for local startups where they can compete, creating positive incentives where there are benefits on the fiscal side, on tax and VAT, and others, and on the regulatory side where local startups can be protected. Now, we find that whenever a new industry comes up, because those industries don't have a lot of regulatory access, because they're not able to lobby more effectively. Those are the ones that get hit with taxes and VAT very, very quickly. So for example, within 18 months of ride-sharing industry coming up, we had VAT and withholding taxes introduced on our drivers' earnings as well as on our transactions. So policymakers need to understand that building digital Bangladesh is an investment. It's literally an investment, and it requires fiscal policy support. That means that you tax less early on in order to allow that local industry to develop for greater gains in the future. So that's something that we would need broad ecosystem support towards. Yes.
Yeah, fine. Sorry to interrupt. I have a question here. I think, you're saying about the policy priorities. Providing to local startups. The policy issue also came up in the discussion on talent management and building C-suite professionals. I just want to ask you, we do see the government being very positive, but my question is whether our priorities are on the right side, because I see a lot of competition. I see a lot of let's say even investment funding and so on and so forth from the government, but I don't, probably it's my lack of understanding, but I don't really see actions related to what you're talking about because of this kind of, let's say, local industry protection, or let's say, like I can see Dr. Asad Karim Khanprio from North South sharing a frustration that the education institutions are not being given the right set of, as Dr. Hanan also said, the right set of, let's say, curriculum or the capacity to build that. So are we setting our priorities right on the policy front? Yes or no?
Sadly, no. I think we have really articulated a vision for building the digital infrastructure of the country. I think we have given encouragement, and there's been a number of positive measures, such as the establishment of Startup Bangladesh, which is the first government-sponsored VC fund in Bangladesh, and a number of positive initiatives, including setting up incubators, setting in and providing other types of support in terms of infrastructure to the startups. But I think on the policy front, it's a constant balance. There are many stakeholders. It's not just the ICT ministry, it's the finance ministry, it's NDR. It's also balancing a lot of competing interests, competing objectives, right? So you have to balance your revenue collection with your growth. And that is a critical area where we need more advocacy, where we need more support, because yes, you have to kind of forego your short-term revenue collection, but that is an investment for the future, for the next 5 years and the next 10 years. So I think we need to connect these dots a lot better.
So I think what I also hear from you now is that, we need a stronger coordination and collaboration between the government agencies directed towards a more inclusive ecosystem. That's what I'm hearing from you. Am I right?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. And then so I'll just say one last thing in closing, although Rahat had touched upon very well, capital. So that's one of the key challenges that's holding back the entire startup ecosystem. The amount of capital that has come into Bangladesh is only a fraction of the capital that has come into other comparably sized countries in the region. So for example, Indonesia, which has only 3x the GDP of Bangladesh and 2x the GDP per capita, has had one company raise about 8 times more than the entire startup ecosystem has done in Bangladesh. And if the entire startup ecosystem in Bangladesh was one company in India, it would rank number 25 or 26 on the list of total amount raised. So that is the challenge. And I think the way to overcome, the way to square that circle is two things. So first of all, I think the local investors would have to come forward, because who invests in startups at the early stages, right? The people that know those companies or know those markets very well, or know those founders very well, and who better than the local ecosystem. So I'm glad to see the angel network developing in Bangladesh. I'm glad to see the incubators come up, especially those that are associated with education institutions like NSU Startup Next. But I think there needs to be more, and obviously, mostly very grateful that Anchorless Bangladesh has set up here and started to back local companies. We need to have more of those, and as Rahat pointed out, Pakistan has shown the way this year in terms of raises many of which have been led by local VC funds. So I think that's one step. I think the second step is for larger startups to scale, and as we attract capital into our own companies, we are also greenlighting the Bangladesh market, right? So investors tend to herd, right? They look at who else is on the cap table. They also look at who else has invested in that market. So larger companies in Bangladesh attracting capital from credible investors is a check mark against not just the companies, but also also next to the entire ecosystem. That means that the next company that goes forward is more positively viewed. So these are the three challenges that face us today. It's true for Pathao and it's true for the entire ecosystem, but one that we're very excited and ready to go and address.
Thank you so much, Fahim. And your point on raising capital is a great segue to go to La Viva investment with Lush Capital. So La Viva, at the start of it, we were doing some discussion, and you were highlighting the importance of understanding the VC map. And I think that's what, Fahim is also emphasizing on, that we need to attract capital, good capital. And that was one of the pivotal points that Rahat made in his speech. So over to you, Laviva, to guide us on the VC map, and how do you think the Bangladeshi startups can tap onto the global VCs?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, thank you so much for having me here. Before I get started, I'll just give a quick introduction of myself. I think the panelists before me and Radhbhai, they didn't need an introduction, but I'm pretty new to the ecosystem in Bangladesh when it comes to startups. So very quickly, I'm born and raised in Bangladesh, studied there until high school, and then moved to Canada to pursue my BCom degree, so Bachelor of Commerce. And then I've been here for the last 10 years. For the last about 5 to 6 years, I've been in the fintech startup ecosystem in Canada. Initially joined a firm where we were actually co-creating a couple of startups ourselves. So we partnered with entrepreneurs and incubated those ideas, funded them, and basically saw them through until growth and followed on as well. So I got a lot of kind of operating experience on that side. And then after that, I joined Lush Capital a couple of years ago when we were basically launching the fund. Fintech focused, we invest in early stage fintech startups across Canada and US. So unfortunately for the current fund, we're not really looking to make investments in Bangladesh, but personally, I'm very passionate about, I think, the potential of Bangladesh. So before I move on to your question, which is about, how can Bangladeshi startups tap into the international VC community? I'd like to reiterate some of the points that, Radhbhai made and some of the other panelists, Fahim, made as well. So first and foremost, I think there's a huge opportunity in Bangladesh because if you just look at the massive market, the size of the population, it's unmatched, right? A lot of Canadian startups, when we're funding them, we have a population of about, I believe, 37, 38 million people. So it's not a lot. And so for a lot of Canadian startups to be able to scale to massive levels, they actually need to expand out of the Canadian market many of the times. So when we're investing in a Canadian startup, a lot of the times we need to understand their international expansion strategies. And quite often they look to the US for expansion. I think in Bangladesh, because of the population that we have, I think that it is very possible to build multi-billion-dollar businesses or multi-billion taka businesses within Bangladesh, and you may not even need to look to expand. We have a growing middle class as well. Education, levels are higher than ever, and so I think there's a lot of ingredients in place to build massive businesses. So why isn't funding there yet? I think any ecosystem takes a little bit of time to develop. So if I think about when I started in the Canadian market, fintech was pretty new. We didn't really hear about very many fintech startups. That's why my last firm, we were building a couple of fintech startups because we didn't have enough fintech startups to fund them. And so over the last couple of years, I really saw a transition because there's more capital now. There's a lot of government initiatives to fund various venture capital firms, along with private money that is coming into those funds as well. We're seeing a lot more talent entering the startup ecosystem, and there's just a lot more awareness of job opportunities in a startup rather than going to an Apple and Google. You then also have international VC. So when I think of international, so non-Canadian, so you have Asian money, you have American money, you have all kinds of capital that is also flowing into the Canadian startup ecosystem, because now there's a lot more awareness of the opportunities, and there's often this arbitrage opportunity where you could actually buy an asset, and by an asset I mean ownership in a company, for sometimes much cheaper in the Canadian market, and then bring that company to the US. And so you're kind of I guess enjoying the same upsides, but you had originally paid a cheaper price for that asset compared to sometimes an American company. So I think the reason I'm mentioning all of this is I think that any ecosystem takes a little bit of time to build. And I think there are some ingredients that the Bangladeshi community already has. If you think about talent, the size of the massive market, I think those ingredients are there. But the ingredient that I feel is very much missing is the capital. And I think when I think about international VCs, one of the points I think it was Fahim that made, that first you need to start working with local VCs, right? Because if I'm thinking of making an investment in the US market, my first question is which VC in the US is participating in that round? Because otherwise, why would a startup, not look at their own backyard, and they would go to a Canadian VC to ask for money, right? So that already starts creating some yellow flags in my head. And these might mean nothing. However, I think that most of the times, international VCs, they need to work, they want to work with local VCs who understand the market, who understand the regulations, and just the way of doing business. It's so different in an emerging market like Bangladesh than it is in, let's say, a Canadian market or a US market. So I think that more investors need to kind of participate in the Bangladeshi startup ecosystem within Bangladesh, whether it's more state-sponsored funds, whether it's government initiatives that actually match private capital going into a fund. I think accelerators for sure and incubators have to play a role in that by creating relationships with the international community as well, because a lot of international investors who might not understand the market very well, they might want to rely on a local accelerator partner to be able to get access to the best deal flow. And then one of the points that Radhbhai made initially was around deal pricing and deal structuring. And I cannot stress this enough. It breaks my heart when we see a really good investment opportunity. The founder is great or the team is great, opportunity is great. However, their capitalization table is completely messed up because they gave away too much equity too soon. And this is really important because as a founder, you're going to stay with this business, or you're expected to stay with this business for years, right? And the way a VC makes money is by growing the value of a business over, let's say, 7-8 years, and then exiting their position. And so if they're betting on a team at the early stages, they need to make sure that this team sticks around. And if they already have given up too much ownership at the very beginning, then this is not possible. And so as a local investor, you might think, oh, I'm getting a great deal because I'm getting 50% of this company at a very low price. But think about the fact that if you do that, then in future, international investors or even just local follow-on investors might not be interested in continuing to fund that company. And continuing to fund that company is really important because that's one of the ways we make sure the company is capitalized enough and that they can grow their value. So with that being said, I'll get to the main question, which was how can Bangladeshi entrepreneurs tap into the international VC community? So I already talked about my first point, which was working with local partners, so local VCs, local investors, angel investors, local accelerators, incubators, funds like Radhbhai's fund. I think Anchorless Bangladesh, like they're doing a great job because they actually have the international connections and they're bringing a lot of spotlight to Bangladesh. So I think funds that have international relationships that can introduce to other VCs, I think is a great way to get started. Second, I would say is you need to target right. So every now and then I will receive a message on LinkedIn or a cold email from a founder from a country where we don't invest, right? And clearly on our website, we say that we only invest in fintech startups in Canada and US for our current fund. And so, I'll get emails sometimes from health tech startups, or I'll get an email from a founder from India or something like that, where clearly you have not done your job to do the research to figure out who is the right investor to reach out to. And I think if you just do that research, that can save a lot of time for everyone, including yourself, right? So targeting the right investor is very, very important. How do you go about that? Maybe just take a look at their website. They might already be saying on their website that they invest in, let's say, emerging markets, or they specifically invest in South Asia. Like, they might have that language already. Second, you can check their portfolio to see if there are any companies that are in those regions, because if not, then that might be a signal that they may not invest in those markets. And you can always, of course, reach out and ask, but just sending a cold email without an introduction, I think is very weak compared to having done your research and potentially getting an introduction from someone. Third, I would say, sorry, did anybody say anything?
Yeah, I just wanted to interject. Is that the last point that you wanted to make? Because I wanted to move on.
Yeah, for sure. I'd say the third one is, yeah, sorry, I just lost my train of thoughts here. I think you need to start building relationships early on. So you cannot just reach out to an investor and expect that they're going to close your funding in the next 1 month. We're very relationship driven people. And a lot of the times the deals that we're doing are actually deals that were introduced to us by somebody else, or we have had a relationship with the founder for many years. And so you need to start building the relationship. And one of the ways maybe to do that is you reach out to investors and say, hey, I want feedback on my business, rather than saying, hey, I'm raising money tomorrow. So once you start building that relationship, they'll trust you more, especially if it's an international VC who may not know the market very well. You have an opportunity as a founder to actually educate them on that market. So I'll kind of pause there. And I think we ran out of time, right?
Thank you so much, Lariba. Some very good points made. The last one being building relationships, but also you further emphasized on the point of, local investors or local VCs being important, because if you're not raising fund locally, then why did you come to the international market? So there's a credibility issue there. Fantastic points. But I just want all our participants today to have their feedback. So I'm running a poll now. So including our panelists, if you could kindly respond to this poll. I'm launching it now. Let us gather your knowledge, all of you who are participating. So please, the poll is launched. Can you all see the poll?
The poll can be seen, but there is no way to choose any option.
Oh, Rubaiyat, no way to input the options.
But I can see people responding already.
All right, let's see. We are trying.
Yeah, I can see people responding. Yes.
I can't see any option to vote.
I think the panelists can't vote, but the audience
I see. Yeah. The other people can vote actually, yeah.
Okay. So, but the panelists, you can see the results coming up on the screen. So far 32% voted. And what I can see is that it's coming up more. Okay. 40% voted, 41%. Great results. So I can see that our participants think we're doing good in terms of ideas, inventions, and research. But experience and competency of the founders is 26%, angel investors 23%, mentors 31%, advisors 20%, global outreach 34%, local pool of investors, one very important point that was mentioned so far, 23%, competence and capacity of the C-suite professionals, 17%. So Hanan sir, I hope you are taking note. Competency and capacity of the frontline workforce, 17%. And some believe that's none of the above. And with respect to the organizational capabilities, universities, 42%, advisory and mentoring organizations, 31%, incubators, 64% believe we are doing good. Co-working spaces, 25%, service providers, consulting, legal and accounting, 25%, investor networks, 36%, venture capital companies, 28%. So I believe our esteemed panelists have taken note of these points. There are some questions that are there. I will get to you with those questions, and I can also see some of my colleagues from different parts of the world who have joined in. Thank you for joining today. So there's a question, Laviva, for you. Except investment, what else we should expect from VC? And also to Rahat, what do VC expect in the early stage startup speech? So Rahat and Laviva, do you want to take that question?
Laviva, why don't you go first?
I'll start on the first question. So what else can you expect? So I think right now, it's a bit of a, I can speak from my experience in the Canadian market. So it's a very competitive VC market right now in Canada because there are a lot of new venture capital funds. There's also a lot of money coming in from the US, as I said. And so I think differentiating yourself as a VC and adding a lot more value than just money is really important. One of the ways is obviously being on the board of the company, being available to the CEOs, at any point in time to give advice on things from, let's say a co-founder wants to leave. How do you help the team navigate through that? Or you have to, you have a really big client that's in the pipeline. How do you help close that sale? So these are some of the areas that I think a VC really needs to step in and help from an advice and support mentorship perspective. The other is introduction. So network, you will always hear that from different VCs. Their network is one of their most important value adds. So either it's client introductions, either it's other investor introductions. I think those are really important points as well.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. It's like, so I would add one quick thing there is as an institutional venture capital fund, which is kind of like how fund like Anchorless is structured, and I believe Luge is also structured like that. Our goal is to return value for our investors. And what that means is when I wake up in the morning, I think about how to help my portfolio companies and my founders. That's it. That's my job. That's my day job. That's my night job. That's what I think about when I sleep, which probably is a bit of a problem, but that's what I do. And that's important. And when you are a startup and a founder, if you can get an institutional VC to be your seed investor, it makes a significant difference in how your life goes in building the company. When you need support, when you need to call somebody at 3 a.m., that investor should be there for you. And that's why VCs become so competitive in the United States. You'll notice most angels and VCs in the US who are successful repeat. Why? Because they have a reputation that they take care of their founders. That's something that we need to embed and imbue in the ecosystem as strongly as possible as the ecosystem gets better. On the flip side, what do we look for from founders and startups? We look for a vision, we look for execution. I think one of the easy way I can say it is we look for short-term execution and long-term vision. We understand that a company doesn't become Bcash or Google in 6 months, right? We get that. What we do also want to understand is, hey, okay, how are you making the decisions that actually allow you to execute and build a foundation over the next 2, 3, 6, 12 months? And on the bigger side, we want them to say, hey, you know what? Over the next 12 months, I'm going to do this. And on the 13th month, after I raise some more funding, I'm going to attack this vertical. And that vertical, if it makes sense, makes us happy because we know that the valuation of the company will be bigger and we will be there to help them raise more capital to enter that market, whatever it may be. So ultimately, short-term execution, long-term vision. I think the other thing for founders to really contextualize and understand is you need to solve a problem instead of copycatting somebody who already exists, or more importantly, whatever solution you may have, it has to be significantly better than what's available in the market right now. If you tell me you're going to save somebody 5 to 7% off their costs, that doesn't work, because for a lot of people, that's a lot of work to switch their whole systems for 5 to 7%. However, if you say they're going to triple their revenues, then I'm excited, because then I know you can go and sell that to people and say, hey, listen, this is worth it for you to completely change your software system potentially. So a couple of things that I think are necessary, but I mean, in Bangladesh, I think we have a lot of things that we need to work on. Ultimately, if it comes down to one thing, it's the ability for me to put a founder in a room with an investor in Hong Kong, in New York, in Singapore, and walk out and feel comfortable that they're going to be able to close the next round of funding.
Thank you so much, Rahat and Laviva. There are a few more questions, but I will move on. But Rahat, as I move on, I'd like to ask you to think about this question that Julian has asked. His question is, what do the panel think is a realistic target for the total value of investments in Bangladeshi startups? Think about it. There's also a question from Kevin. He's asking whether the startups concentrate on areas where they can grow too fast, and therefore they leave out opportunities in sectors like agriculture and so on and so forth. And that's where Rubaiyat Khan has asked a question, which takes me to Imran, our next panelist. So Imran, are you there with me?
Yes.
Okay, so the question that I have for you is exactly, I think, I mean, what Rubaiyat is asking. His question is, I mean, why our startups are not tackling problems faced by the mass populations? We're talking about 165 million people. So, I mean, what about healthcare, education? And as we have seen, Rahat has identified them as one of the key sectors where we need solutions and investment. So over to you to explain what opportunities do you see there, and how do you think the startups can tap onto those opportunities?
Right. Thank you very much. I guess yeah, we were having very lively discussion, although the discussion was primarily focused on investments so far, because our panelists were focusing on the investment part. But this particular question is more on the entrepreneurs who are starting startup with a vision. And when we see the entrepreneurs, a lot of our entrepreneurs start startup without proper understanding of the problem. Of course, you can do a lot of things with passion, but you need to have proper understanding. Rubaiyat actually is representing Gion, and Gion is doing a great work in healthcare sector. We have not seen a lot of large scale startups solving problems, but there are quite a lot of promising ones. I can name a few, starting with, of course, Pathao. Pathao is kind of solving at a quite a large scale the unemployment and underemployment problem. We have done some assessment together with Pathao, and the results show that a lot of Pathao riders are HSC bachelor degree holders. That means these young people with relatively good education were not getting a job, and their income, significant part of their income comes from actually Pathao. And I'm sure this is the case with other ride-sharing spaces. Same can go for Sheba XYZ, who are providing access to a market to a lot of different types of professionals and solving the underemployment scenario. Pathao is, of course, came into being as a ride sharing when we all know that the scenario for mass transportation in Bangladesh was quite a mess. It is still not in where it should be, but Pathao and Uber and other ride-sharing platforms, they became successful because the problem was so acute at a mass level that they quickly were able to grab the market. Similarly, for the B2B transportation solution, it is also quite messy in Bangladesh, and platforms like Truck Lagbe, they are trying to organize things quite a lot. In health service, I think we have a lot of opportunities that are not tapped yet, and a lot of things are focused on the urban areas primarily. But there are some good startups doing great work already, like Prabha. They are doing this uh, linkage with qualified doctors, and you can get video consultation, home-based diagnostic service, etc. from Prava. There are small startups like Bucket Engineers who are doing health-related work with autism and people with disabilities. We have participant here from iFarmer, and iFarmer is doing great work in the linking the agricultural sector with financial options from different people like you and me. So that is quite a fascinating evolvement of work going on. iFarmer is also trying to do the farm to fork linkage. Not only iFarmer, startups like Bhalo, like Hash Food, like Parmida, and there are many more who are trying to do this. In terms of solving problem related to water, for example, drink well. They are working in the arsenic affected areas and trying to give people drinking water. Max Tap Water is trying to provide tap water to the people who need to spend a lot of time to go outside and have their drinking water and water for other household necessities. Organization like ShopUp, they are working with hundreds and thousands of cottage and small enterprises, Facebook-based groups, and supporting them with delivery and supporting them with products. So that is something great that is happening. And ShopUp was successful in getting relatively sizable investment as well. Organizations like Garbage Man, who are working in waste management related issues. TransEnd, they're working to improve the skills of transgender people and linking them, interestingly, with the startups for good employment opportunities. So as we have seen in the poll, there are no shortage in ideas, but because of I think in a very quick poll, we have seen quite a realistic result that the entrepreneurs with the great ideas, but with lack of experience and lack of proper mentors, are not able to scale to a mass level that can at attract the investors sizable and gain sizable investment. So I think the educational institution like North-South, Dr. Hanan, of course, mentioned about the limitation, but I guess we need to find a way so that we can support them. I guess more established uh, startups here can also come forward to support the new ones. Accelerators need to take note of these issues and guide the entrepreneurs there. Plus, I guess the more experienced businessmen, not just startups in Bangladesh, uh, I guess the entrepreneurs should get them in their board or as their advisor, mentor, to help them understand how to tackle operational challenges and how to, really make their dream successful. I think there are a lot of dreamers, but the handling operational challenge is a different ball game, and the entrepreneurs need support there, as the poll suggested. I'd stop here.
Well,
If you have any question, I can probably respond to that.
there are actually few, but we will follow up on that. But Kevin is saying there is not much good news about Bangladesh coming out internationally, and that might be one of the reasons why the investors are not attracted. My good colleague.
I think that is one very important area. Is as a nation, Bangladesh is very poor in communicating. A lot of things are happening that we who are kind of staying here, we think that these are interesting work, but we just discussed among ourselves, but we are not doing a great work, as Kevin rightly pointed out, to bring the positive news and the vibrant scenario that is there to the outside community. And it is not just a one-off thing. It has to be a continuous thing, so that potential investors in Europe, USA, or Asia know about the things in Bangladesh on a continuous basis and become more interested. I guess it is the responsibility of the entrepreneurs, of course, but it is also the responsibility of the whole ecosystem. Our news outlets are not covering the positive news properly, and so on. So yes, of course, that is where we are lacking big time.
Great. I'll move on to Shamma now. But before doing so, there is a very interesting question. I don't want you to answer any of you now, but take note of it. The question is, as it happens, people don't encourage to pursue a startup that is already providing services on that market, or even if the competitor has a market gap or some fault, yet people forbid to start another startup based on the same idea. What's the take of the panel on that? And also, I think, I mean, I'm getting some messages on my personal box about the debate on startup versus SMEs, which we can't take right away right now, but I will come to that. Shamma, are you there with me?
Hi, I'm here. Yes. Thanks
Great.
for having me.
Thank you for doing a deep listening so far. So, my question to you is, I mean, being a SaaS transformation leader from Colibri Incorporated, so what do you think are, are the pressing problems that also have global relevance, and tackle them? How can Bangladesh startups tackle those pressing
Sure.
problems? And also, how Bangladesh can build world-class SaaS startups. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And thanks for introducing me as a SaaS transformation leader in Colibra. But I also have another introduction, which I really want to highlight here. I'm actually leading the sales and partnerships team in a local SaaS startup called myalice.ai. So do check it out. I would like to talk a little bit more about them as well, but let me tackle the question in a very structured way. So how can Bangladeshi startups identify number one, and tackle, number two, which are the most pressing problems that have global relevance, right? So there are three things to identify more or less on the problems that you want to tackle. So on a high level, you can either, on a high level, you can improve an existing way of business that and take it to a completely different level, or you can be completely innovative. So play on a field that has never been touched before. So there are two different ways that you can tackle on a high level some of the problems that exist. Now, if I look into the Bangladeshi, let's say the Bangladeshi infrastructure, there are so many problems, whether it's population problem, whether it's traffic problem, whether it's, things around agriculture, supply chain, etc. There are a lot of problems that you can solve locally. So one of my encouraging factors to all the people that I meet in the ecosystem is try to understand what you can first solve locally, because quite often than not, a lot of these problems can also be relevant to your neighboring countries, and that's how you would scale, right? So you would want your business to scale and not just be super hyper localized all the time. Now, the other things when you are considering in Bangladesh and how to actually build the level of quality of the products that we deliver, right? So you will see that there is a huge untapped market. It's a country of 163 million population. We have our share of calamities, we have our share of issues that needs to be solved, and how quickly you can pick up on those problems to solve it and understand the consumer trends is very, very important. And I think that, given the huge consumer market in this area, you can definitely look at opportunities to scale in the consumer market as well as the B2B market as well. Fahim has already talked about, identifying a problem that is large enough that needs a fix today and in your market first. Now, how good your current market knowledge is, that's also quite important. If you are able to identify global trends that you are picking up from your neighboring countries, and what works over there, there is a 80 to 90% chance that it will probably work in our country as well. And the 20% that probably will not work might be due to some kind of lack of education or accessibility, or maybe government policies that are not really friendly to the startup ecosystem, for example. If I dig deeper into what are the areas that I think might be really relevant and might have global relevance and significance in terms of solving the problem, there are quite a few. Like first, if I look into the financial services sector, financial inclusion in Bangladesh is very low. There is a lot of unbanked population, right? So Africa did quite a good job at it, where they identified this, that there are a lot of unbanked population, and decided that, okay, let's come up with an innovative solution where we provide microloans to these people, and Tala came into play as well. So this startup called Tala, do check them out. We can change that. We have the power to bring non-traditional banking to the unbanked as well. And just similarly to what Bikash has been doing and so on. But I think there needs to be more and more of these financial services, micro lending, for example, or peer-to-peer lending. These are the kind of things that we probably could look into. Moreover, people are not still comfortable with even the basics of internet banking. So for example, our local banking internet software is actually not that user friendly. So let's kind of identify how can we make that better and then replicate it in other markets as well. I know that, for example, mobile-based financial services, it's a little bit dependent on interoperability between the banks, between different kinds of financial institutions. And I know that Bangladesh Bangladesh Bank is already taking steps to ensure that MFS interoperability is there by the end of this year. I don't know how far that work has gone, but following that, the users will actually be able to transfer all the funds to all operators and banks free of cost, right? So interoperability between two platforms can be ensured. And in that way, you can actually, startups can actually build on top of that information as well. So having these kind of APIs, like Europe, for example, has taken advantage of the PSD2 regulation, which is there for electronic payment services, right? So what if our government looks into these kind of policies, and then if the policy is implemented similar to the PSD2 or similar to having an API for the financial services sector, how can we leverage on top of that? So looking at the trends, I think it's quite important as well. The other things I can point out, and I think Imran Bhai also mentioned about the farming and agricultural sector. That's a 4.5 billion estimated market size. Now, how can we take that and kind of look at the supply chain industry in agriculture, look at the funding industry in agriculture, look at how we can combine different kinds of data. And I'm a data person, so I'm going to talk about data, whether it's weather data, whether it's historical data, soil data, etc. How can you equip these farmers who are in Bangladesh? How can you equip them with the knowledge to build better agricultural system and automate their farming quality, or the way reduce the amount of food waste that's happening during the supply chain process and so on. So there's a lot of scope there as well. I'm not going to talk about garments and retail industry too much because I'm not a pro at that area. But if I look into other relevant sectors that are globally applicable around artificial intelligence, these are things. These are sectors where we can just build something around the artificial intelligence capabilities and innovate around that and accelerate in global markets. And I think this is possible even now. Like, for example, MyAlice, it's a conversational AI-based platform, which means that you can actually, you can build on top of it. Like, it's targeted currently towards, towards a lot of companies who are supporting multi-channel social media platforms. However, right now they're niching down. So they're niching down to an area where they want to target e-commerce. So e-commerce sector is huge. It's a massive, massive market size, right? So people should be able to tap into that as well. Now, if I'm looking into education sector, we already have startups like Shiko, which is a mobile-based learning platform. We have startups like Thrive, which are providing learning tools. We have Upskill, which I think they're providing like enhanced skills learning platform online, EduHive and others. These are really, I do believe genuinely that these are scalable platforms. Now, what it needs is having the right kind of people in there in order to expand to the other markets as well. I think there are other untapped markets as well, but I'm not going to go into too much detail around that given the time we have. But what I want to talk about is how can Bangladesh actually build a world-class SaaS startup? Now, building a world-class SaaS startup is similar in terms of trajectory to building a world-class company. And I think there are some very basic things that needs to be kept in mind. The first of all is what kind of infrastructure you're building it on. If I'm really being a very technical perspective, for example, what kind of infrastructure you're building on. For any SaaS startup, and if you want to make it globally scalable, you need to think about data. Where is the data being held? You need to think about the user interface, the UX UI. It needs to be of world class as well, right? And you need to be able to cater to, let's say, markets which are, again, coming back to solving a particular problem that is accessible that can be solved and accessible from anywhere, right? So that's where the SaaS market or software as a service market can mostly play. And if you're already playing in a very saturated field, you can still differentiate, right? You can still differentiate based on four main things, I would say, around pricing or availability or scarcity or innovation or niching down on a specific market. And for most SaaS startups here, I would really, really encourage you to have advisors who are expats from abroad, who work in Google, who work in all the AWSs and Oracles and so on. I think they're the ones who will be able to guide you a lot more in terms of how actually to form the product in a way that is applicable to a global market. And there are some criteria you need to understand as well. So for example, when it comes to problem, the relevant question you need to ask is how painful is the problem that the software is solving? How obvious is the solution's value to the target market? Or does the problem require a really unique solution for the local market or not? Or are they perfectly happy with what they have right now? You need to understand the market and scale. How big is the market within this country, so Bangladesh, and across the continent, or even in a regional scale? How big is the market? What is the power dynamic between you as a software seller and the potential buyer in the market as well? And who is benefiting most, right? So talking about markets and scale. The other things, of course, you need to check out local competitions and global competition, how difficult it is for foreign competition to actually enter this market in the same domain in the SaaS world that you're building. And if so, can they do it using existing global solutions, or do they go, do they have to hyper target local users and so on? You need to think about the environment. What are the macro trends and what are the micro trends that help or hurt a company in that space? And what are the regulatory changes? Being very close to the regulatory changes that's happening is going to probably determine some of the success factors on a local as well as global scale as well. And of course, finally, how does this problem, the solution, for example, impact the lives of the people as well? So I think, I talked about a lot of different things, but I hope that it gives you a little bit of an overview of where you can play, and a little bit of an insight on what are the still untapped market potential in Bangladesh where startups can play as well.
Thank you so much, Shamash. Such wise words. I was listening very deeply. I think, everything that you said, people have taken note of it. Very, sharp expert opinions to follow up on. I have a few, Bijon, I'm coming to you, but I can't but ask this a few questions and direct it to the panel. Rahat, in one sentence, can you answer this question very quickly? How can we uniquely position Bangladesh so it can be globally viewed as an attractive place to invest? Do you have a one sentence?
I have one sentence for any international investor looking at it. The problems are the opportunities.
Okay.
That's
okay.
it.
Okay. I hope.
Look, you don't have much healthcare. Come here, invest in healthcare. We don't have high velocity of capital. Come here, invest in fintech. You need to upgrade the garment so it's more competitive in the next 20 years. Come here, invest in the garments. Stop complaining about the news that you're seeing publicly. Come here, we'll host you, we'll show you what's possible. But I will tell you, for every dollar that you put into this country over the next decade, you will get a return that's arguably as good or better than anywhere else in the world.
Fantastic. This is being recorded. I'll put it up on YouTube. So one question is, given Bangladesh's vulnerability to climate change, what contributions, if any, do you think startups can make to help cope, build resilience, and mitigate? I think, Shamma, you kind of gave us the planning that we need to do. So if I'm not wrong. So, but do you want to take this question?
Sorry, can you repeat the question one more time?
The question is, given Bangladesh's vulnerability to climate change, what contributions, if any, do you think startups can make to help cope, build resilience, and mitigate?
Okay, I'm not so sure about co-building resilience and mitigate completely. I think we need to start somewhere. I think the way, when we're looking at climate change effects, and I'm no climate change expert, right? But I think there are some responsibilities that fall on the big industries themselves that are running in Bangladesh as well. So one of the largest, waste producers is in the, let's say in the leather industry, or maybe even in the garments industry to some extent. How can we mitigate those problems? Like, the waste that's produced from these industries, how can we solve this problem so that they don't end up in our rivers and they don't end up in our food that we were consuming from the rivers, right? So I think there is a lot of opportunities there. If you just look at your own backyard, you will find tons of examples. We have a startup. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the startup's name is SoulShare, which is actually looking into energy sector, right? So when it comes to startups like SoulShare, they created this approach to bring affordable solar electricity to villages and remote parts, and even in some aspects, even in the cities as well. And how can we make sure that we support these kind of startups? I think we collectively as a startup ecosystem have a responsibility to support these kind of startups, to make sure that they sustain themselves and make sure that they scale. So this is just, on a high level, my opinion. And again, I can go on and on about what are all the different things.
Okay, Shama, thank you. So a question to maybe both Fahim and Rahat. Fahim, you can come. There was a question, why don't we have more bKash? First question is, do you recognize bKash as a startup? And then next question is, why do we not have more bKash?
Okay, so I'll take the second part of that question first, because it's the one that's more relevant. It goes back to the scale and scaling issue. The killer app for bKash was actually not an app, right? It was harnessing the existing infrastructure of the telecom operators and the considerable strength of the partner organizations on the distribution front to solve a previously insurmountable problem, which is the domestic migrant workers living in the cities sending money back to their families. Previously, it used to cost them close to 20 to 30% of the amount of money that they're sending between actually taking time off from work or handing it to a friend or another family member and traveling back to their home district to send the money. Now you can do it instantaneously at a cost of less than 2%. So that's the killer app. And the reason that there's been very few companies that has been able to scale to that level over a short period of time is in problem identification and market size. The market size was so significant and so large, and the problem so acute that it required an instant solution. And the solution itself was also catered to the level of technology adoption at the time, which was in starting in 2012, and that is why it's been able to scale. The challenge with many other startups is that there's a constant balance between addressing a problem that is at a large scale versus one that can be monetized very, very quickly. So the problem that a lot of startups face today is coming up with a solution for the top 5% of the market, the urban, highly engaged, tech-savvy population. But that's a very small market segment. It's probably a few million people. So that is the reason why many startups have found it challenging to scale, because they're not addressing problems that are large enough yet. Whether bKash is a startup or not, that's a debatable question. I think it's an incredibly successful company, and it has been able to harness what is in its competitive advantage to solve a real problem for the masses. And that's what is ultimately the most important thing in this equation.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Fahim. Bijan, are you there with me?
Hi, Rohit, I'm here.
Great. Thank you again for your deep listening. You're the last in the panel. But I have some very interesting questions to you and sharp answers that's what I'm expecting from you. So you wanted to first answer to my question about investments, where investments are coming from in Bangladesh and from which sectors. And then if you can guide us, we did speak about policies. So which policies or stakeholders are missing in the Bangladesh startup ecosystem? And also if you can shed your light on whether we are getting our priorities right in terms of policies, and how do we democratize the startup ecosystem? How do we make more startups flourish from outside Dhaka? So I think you wanted to share the screen, so I will take off my screen. Over to you, Bijan.
Thank you, Rohit, and thanks to everyone. It was a great 1.5 hours listening to everyone. Learned a lot of things, so really look forward to that. I'm just going to share my screen. I'll spend a couple of minutes on each, so hopefully in 5-6 minutes I should be able to wrap it up. In terms of where the most of the investments are happening, this is a dashboard that we jointly manage with Anchorless Bangladesh with support from Startup Bangladesh Limited. If you can largely see, there are close to 90 companies that has been funded. Of that, closing to 183 deals, right? Of that, around 101 deals has been disclosed to the market. The rest of them are confidential. What's very interesting is of the 330 million that has been raised over the last 10 years, 306 million has been from global funding, right? Only 23 million has come from local funding. So yes, Bangladesh does have problems with image getting investments, but that's also true when we look at startups. A large percentage of the funding has come from international sources as well. Even in 2020, the number was something around 39 million, and 2021 so far, we are deep in the pandemic, but it's something around 36 million. Sector-wise, fintech is something that has gotten a lot of funding. Primarily, I think bKash has been recorded as one of the fintech companies, but a lot of companies, for example, like ShopUp has kind of like a cross-cutting fintech overarching, even if they work in logistics. So there can be a bit of those sectoral convergence happening. logistics, mobility, and then of course e-commerce, healthcare, consumer durable software. Those kind of sectors are also coming in. In terms of potential sectors that can also come up, I think Rahat Bhai and again a lot of the panelists also mentioned, education is definitely something that can come after health. But I was also looking, hearing from Shama as well, especially there would be deep tech opportunities that can also come in. And of course, agriculture seems to be something, we see a few of the startups here as well. I think that can definitely come in as well. But even if they come in, I do see there can be cross-cutting with other sectors. For example, what iPharma does, they are in agriculture, but they have a cross-cutting with logistics, mobility, e-com, as well as fintech, right? So there can be a lot of these hybrid components coming up as well. So that's the first, I think, in terms of part. I think the large part of the investment again comes from venture funds, but again, there are corporate angels. A few also comes from a grant, non-repayable investments as well, right? And these are some of the few deals that has been taking place in the market as of recently as well. I would want to move to the second question in terms of what policies that needs to come in. Can you guys see my screen? The slide deck that I'm showing right now.
Yeah, we can.
Yes, we can.
Perfect, thanks. I just have a couple of slides here. I think first thing we often want to start, and there was this comment on the chat window that Bangladesh needs to work on the getting a global perception of the Bangladesh, right? Bad news sells, and I think Bangladesh is a country who has historically received a lot of ODS, right? But the game is going to change as we become a middle income country, and we need to stop selling this systematically, this perception that Bangladesh has a lot of poverty, which definitely there is, but always highlighting what are the negatives of the country. We need to work and build a more global brand perception. Now, when we promote the brand Bangladesh, that the challenges or the opportunities or the best kept secret in Asia, or the digital gold mine of Asia, right? The problem is it's not systematic. You don't do it consistently over time. So it kind of happens in kind of, I would say, bursts, and then it stops. And then it's not coherent or integrated. So different components, different institutions, private, public, semi-development, semi-private, public-private initiatives, they do it separately. So there is no in silos. So there's not a lot of synchronization that keeps happening, right? And we need to do that consistently and give government incentives, tax subsidies where it's needed, target investors and stakeholders. And then at the same time, we need to walk the talk. We need to reform the market entry process. If you're saying that the BIDA has a one-stop solution service, that's fine. But whether international investors can invest in Singapore-based entities, then whether local companies can easily invest outside and open a Singapore or Delaware-based entity, get the money here. Local investors can hold shares from the Singapore entities. So those kind of processes needs to be figured out, right? This also came up that we need to have influential NRBs to also in the net as well. But this whole market entry process needs to change, right? So again, this is not something that's exhaustive, but if I just broadly jot down some of the points that I was thinking about when I thought of this question, is that have a more coherent startup policy that this is what we're supporting. What took us Bangladesh over the last 50 years won't take us to 2030. Where we want to have a large percentage of GI and bring global wealth. Build solid companies out of Bangladesh in the technology domain. We need to change, right? And that's why I think even if you look at India, the kind of resources, policy support they've put in the startups, that needs to happen for Bangladesh as well. Fund of funds would be something that would be super useful to get local funding started. India has done that in the past. Indonesia has done that, and I think that's something that can happen in Bangladesh as well. Investor benefits, as you see, the local percentage of the investor is actually quite low. So we've tried to incentivize banks to invest in startups. That's fine, but I don't think banks really understand startup investing. You need to figure out how you can actually get more corporate venture capital kind of come in. How incentivize more investors who have a direct relation to investing in startups. Like how do you incentivize them, whether through tax, whether through something else. That needs to happen. For example, in India, after the demonetization, there was this scope that you can invest in the small cap market, and that kind of also picked the small cap market for investors also picked up. Ease of doing business. To be honest, I think Nepal is also somewhere around 98, and Bangladesh is still 168. India is 63, Vietnam is 70. We need to get that up, however it can be. This was again touched along, but I think the industry academia collaboration will play a very, very strong role. Even if you look at countries like South Korea, a lot of this R&D happens in universities and then goes into these large tech companies, right? In Bangladesh, I think this collaboration is to be a lot more strengthful, and I'm glad that North-South University here, I was listening that they were doing this NSU Startup Next. That's great. We need a lot more of this, right? Corporate venture capital, yes, international investors would come in, but local money also needs to come in. Means if we don't put money in the startups, then how come global confidence will come into the country, right? And this is to happen a lot more, right? Without this, yes, I think Facebook puts in money, Google puts in money in India, but before that, a lot of Indian money also the Jio also put in a lot of Indian money. Reliance Group put a lot of Indian money on that company as well, right? Before the large global tech companies came in, right? Or yes, Flip companies like Future Bazaar Group invested a lot of them in e-commerce sector themselves before Amazon and all this international Walmart came into India as well. And of course, Startup Bangladesh Limited, the $65 million venture capital fund led by Tina Jabinap under the Ministry of ICT is a great start, but we need much more initiatives like that, to support the whole ecosystem and have that digital infrastructure that can support that. The last question, there's just a lot of questions around how this can become more inclusive. I just want to quickly show a map. This is a map of the investors that are here. What are some of the investments that are happening in the country? Who also made these investments? All companies. Sorry about that. And this is a kind of like a map of global, local investors. But what I want to show is this particular map, and I feel happy that this gets elaborated every time. But if you look, again, this is not an exhaustive list. I put this here because people get a bit cranky when I sometimes miss out logos. Again, I do apologize if I missed anyone's logos. I try to be as exhaustive as possible. But if you look at it, a lot of these initiatives of ecosystem buildings happens a lot of centrally in Dhaka. But I think there are fantastic tech talent outside. And I think I was seeing the chat window. There's this company in Sylhet. I think Fahad was mentioning that. Sylhet has Sharjah University, which is a tech hub, right? And I do believe Bangladesh has fantastic these tech universities all around the country, right? On the southern side, the northern side, on the middle side. But we need more of this ecosystem initiatives being there. Even if you look at Dhaka, how many universities actually work on this particular space? NSU Startup is a great example. ULab has a few programs. Darfur University has a few programs. Dhaka University has a few programs. BRAC has a few programs. But that's maybe I'm missing a lot more. But this have to be much more inclusive. So if you want to build talent from everyone in Bangladesh, I think in this collaboration, especially university-led incubators can play a role as well. And then again, if you look at a lot of the global local incubators, accelerators that are working, a lot of them are again a lot Dhaka-based, right? If you want to again go to other countries, you need to expand and go beyond just what's in Dhaka or maybe in Chittagong, just to expand the net. And maybe next time when we do this presentation, possibly next year, if Rubaiyat Bhai kindly organizes one again, maybe this will get a lot more filled and we'll have a lot more enterprises from outside Dhaka as well. Yeah, so that is what I wanted to share. I'll stop because we don't have a lot of time. Thank you, and back to you, Rubaiyat Bhai.
Thank you so much, Bijon, for your precise presentation and discussions. Thank you so much. Now, many of you wanted to see the results from the poll. So I would give the floor to my colleagues to just quickly share the poll result. Do you have it ready?
Yes, can everyone see my screen?
Can you go to slide 1 and then zoom out, zoom it? Yeah.
Can you see it now?
Yeah, you can probably take a screenshot, people, or take a photo for your future reference. Yeah, let's move on to the next one. That's great.
I've already, yes. Can you see the second question here?
Yeah, I think we will share this with our participants through mail afterwards. I will give the floor to Fahim to give his closing remarks and close today's session. But to all of you who have joined and was with us, just a few notes. This policy dialogue that we have started together with North-South University is going to continue for another 6 months. I mean, we are hoping to organize 2 more series, and with each of the webinar, we are publishing a policy paper which will reach out to you. Also, we intend to publish a book at the end of the year with all the outcomes that we have and share it with the policymakers. I thank on my behalf to Rahat, to Professor Hannan. So thank you so much for being with us. I thank Shama, I thank Laviva, I thank Fahim, Imran, Bijon, to all of you. Over to you, Fahim, to take us through the end.
Thank you, Rubaiyat. And thank you again to Innovision Consulting for organizing this very timely series of discussions and having this session focusing on startup ecosystem and the future that we're all building together. I'd like to start off by thanking Rahat for his very thoughtful keynote presentation, especially on advising startups and how to position them for attracting capital. I think you've made a couple of very important points regarding the significance of the local investor ecosystem as the initial launchpad to attract further capital into the system and into the country. And that's very important. I think we have seen the benefit of that in other markets as well. Professor Hannan Chaudhuri, thank you very much for your very candid identification of the gaps and the improvement areas in the academic curriculum, especially in areas of business. I think we also would like to acknowledge, however, the mindset that students that are coming out of universities such as North-South have today, which which I'm very proud to say, they have a very much of a learning mindset, and they're quick to adapt and quick to pick up new topics. And on behalf of Patao and on behalf of someone who is really invested in the development of this ecosystem, we'd love to collaborate with institutions such as North-South and other academic institutions to help incorporate the practical and the technical aspects of business and areas like marketing, etc., into the curriculum, whether as guest lecturers or workshops or in any other manner. So I hope this would be the start of a collaboration and a partnership. I also had the opportunity to talk about some of the challenges faced by startups, and I think one of the key things that's truly holding us back is really a mindset and a culture. I think we're only limited by our imagination, we're only limited by our execution, and those are the areas that we need to focus on going forward. Laviva Mazhar spoke extensively about the importance of investor targeting and how it can ensure that you have a greater conversion in your funnel. She also shared some very important perspectives on building relationships with investors and having it be a longer term conversation, both pre-investment and post-investment, and how the investor can bring in a lot of value, not just in terms of the capital that they contribute, but also act as a signal for other investors in the future, as well as getting that phone call for adding further operational value and strategic insights. Imran Sadruddin gave a very broad overview of local startups, not only solving problems, but also creating economic and social impact. I think this is a story that needs to be told both for local and broader audiences, especially our policymakers, so they understand it's not just the businesses that are growing and thriving and the economic impact that are being created, but also some very critical social problems getting solved. So it's important to build that buy-in amongst our policymakers and the broader ecosystem. Shama Ragib shared a lot of great insights on how technology and infrastructure that has been proven elsewhere can be harnessed and applied in the local context in Bangladesh, bringing in examples and experiences, not just in developed markets, but also in other developing markets. And I'd also love to give a shout out to her for engaging with local company My Alice. And I think this is one of the best examples of how we can engage our best talent and resources globally and facilitate this knowledge transfer and talent development. Right? I think this is a continuing process. So would love to see more people on Rahat's Google Sheet that he maintains so diligently. We have a fantastic talent pool outside of Bangladesh, of Bangladeshi individuals, and we hope that many of whom would engage with the local tech and startup ecosystem, and perhaps some of them find a reason to come back. And then finally, Bijon Islam gave a very thorough, very comprehensive presentation regarding investments in Bangladesh. Big shout out to him, to Rahat, and to Startup Bangladesh Limited in putting together this database. I think it is very important to investors to see who has been investing into the sector, into the country, and which sectors are being invested. Because I think, as I often like to say, the reason there hasn't been as much investment into the startup ecosystem in Bangladesh is because there hasn't been enough startup ecosystem in Bangladesh. So as we build up more track record, as there are more exits, that gives confidence to new investors to come in. And Bijon also highlighted some very important work that is being done in identifying certain policy areas for the development of the startup ecosystem. And we look forward to collaborating with him and others in this process. So this was overall a very engaged discussion. I thank Rubaiyat and Innovision and the fantastic team that you have over here, along with all the other partners, Angular's partners, Patao, the Financial Express, and many others who've been involved in this series of conversations. The conversation series is titled the Bangladesh at 50, Bangladesh Miracle at 50. It was truly perhaps a miracle, from the post-conflict, country that emerged, 50 years ago to where we are today. But where we need to go in the next 50 years is far beyond, and it will take a lot of passion. It will take a lot of imagination, a lot of ideation, but at the end of the day, it will take execution from all of us. And I'm so delighted that there are so many passionate people involved in this endeavor, and I wish you all the best, and I wish us all the best. So thank you very much. Over to you, Rubaiyat.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, dear panelists. Thank you, all the participants. I look forward to collaborating with you. And good luck, good night, and good day. Take care. Bye-bye.